Okay, this is the next video in the series entitled Heroku Architecture Credential by Example. I'm going to make sure my audio is working. I just did this whole video and the audio didn't work, so this is my second pass at it. So this video is part of a series. It's available through a Medium article of the same title. Okay. We had just finished up a bunch of sections on Postgres, and we're going to switch gears and talk about Redis, which is another type of data store. So through example, we're going to talk about why would we even use one of these like Redis. It's a part of a category called an in-memory cache. We're going to do a local setup, a Heroku setup, and then we'll do a simple example of code where we take advantage of Redis, just to sort of exercise Redis. Why an in-memory cache? Quick and dirty here is we eventually might want to scale our app up with many dynos with a load balancer in front of it where it randomly assigns traffic to one of the dynos. So generally that means those dynos are stateless, and that's the general pattern. And that means that you can't store like state in the dynos themselves. So what we just spent a lot of time doing is storing state in a database, which is in disk, and not necessarily as performant if it was in memory. So the obviously next answer is, okay, well, let's create a database that stores everything in memory and maybe has a persistent connection to the app, right? And so that we can store stuff really quick, right? Generally, you're going to use Redis for things that, not tons of data, and it's got to be data that you really need quickly. So it's basically a quick cache of data that you can get at. So we'll do a simple example later that sort of illustrates a pattern where you might use something like that. So let's talk about Redis real quick. Redis itself is a Heroku add-on. It's also a product you can get outside of Heroku, but it's kind of their de facto answer for in-memory caches. Essentially, it's a key value store. Key is a string. Value can be a string, most likely, but it can be other. They have other kinds of data structures that you can put for hashes and whatnot as your value. In this case, we're just going to use key value, and value being string. There's technically just 16 different databases out of the box that Redis provides, 0 through 15. But in our case, we're just going to use just a single database. We don't need to connect to multiple databases. That adds a level of complexity that we don't necessarily need, right? The way, if you're storing many different objects within your database, right? One way of separating different kinds of objects is to use a prefix. So like a prefix, colon, and then the unique key. And that way you just kind of keep your data clean, and you can sort of differentiate between different kinds of objects. And so the example we're going to use is sort of a lightweight version of authentication. It's not probably something you really use from production, or even close to production, but I wanted to keep it simple, but it's in the spirit of how you might use a Redis cache with authentication. Okay, so that's it for the talking. And now let's get to getting our environment ready to use Redis. So cd documents. Okay, the first thing we need to do is get our local environment in shape. So what I'm going to do is open up the code. So this code's untouched from our earlier version. And I want to open up, in this case, I'm going to open up Docker Compose. And so what we want to do is we want to add a new section to this. Okay, wait for this to wake up here. Okay, I think it's now woken up. Why aren't you? Our machine is still being slow, but okay, whatever. We're going to call it cache. This is an arbitrary name here. What's more important is we provide an image that's valid. And I'm going to use Redis 4 because that's what Heroku supports. Ports is the other configuration value. If you want to know how to read, what to put in here, if you just Google Docker Redis, it'll tell you exactly how to do this, right? And I'm going to expose port 6379. Oops, I need a dash. 6379 in the container to 6379 on a computer. Okay, so now that's it. So once I save this, I can close this, and I switch back to my editor, I can do Docker compose up to bring up all the services. Now the database was already there, so it didn't do anything with the database, but it's going to bring up Redis here. So now I can do Docker, Control C it, then Docker compose start, run them in the background, and Docker PS. I will see that I'm running two different containers, one for Redis and one for Postgres. Okay, so that's good. So next thing is, in order for our code to interact with the Redis server, right? Just like Postgres, there's a environment file. I think I forgot to delete this. So when we use Heroku and we add add-ons, they're going to automatically manage a URL called Redis URL. So we're going to use that same locally. And in this case, the URL in this case refers on my local machine to my local instance of Redis. Okay, so that's something you need to add here for your code to work, right? That's it for local. The next piece is how do we deal with review apps? And so when you say review apps, you should be thinking app.json, because that's how you define sort of that environment. And here you can see the add-ons are here. We're going to add in a Heroku Redis. And now that means when the review app opens up, it's going to spin up Heroku Redis as an add-on, populate the environment variable, and now it's done. So that was pretty simple. The next thing is that just handles review apps. So it doesn't handle your other environments. And so the other environments meaning staging and production. So now it turns out that this is my second pass at this video, so I actually did this earlier. So let me just remove, I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to leave, let me just delete it from here. And I will re-add it in just so you see it being added in. This is, okay. Okay, so removed here. So one way of adding it is just typing in right here, right? I did want to actually show you how to do this from the command line. So I actually did this earlier, so I'm going to save myself all the typing. My machine crashed, so of course it doesn't have it. Okay, so let me just do it the hard way. So if I want to list out what add-ons are running on a particular app, I can type in Heroku. Get my notes out here real quick. It is Heroku add-ons. Okay, then I have to specify the app. So in this case, the app is Heroku cert Larkin Tucker stage. Okay, and this will just list out the add-ons that exist on that app. So let's let this play out. Okay, you can see there's paper trail and database. So then if I want to add one, I can come in here and just type in :create, and then it's going to be Heroku Redis with no plan. It's in default to the default plan, which is the hobby plan. And I hit enter, and that's it. Now one thing, quick note here, the hobby plan's data is not persisted. It's important because one, if you start and stop your Redis instance, you will lose all your data with the hobby plan. Also, because Heroku manages all of the add-ons, they will do regular maintenance, say once a month, upgrading the version of Redis, like maybe doing patches. And when they do that, they bring down your instance and bring it back up. So if you need to keep your cache around for like authentications, like a good example, then you probably don't want to be using a hobby plan. So that's just a side note. Okay, if you just go back just to prove out what happened, if I just hit reload here, you will notice that now I have Redis here. And it's still being provisioned right now, but when it's done, it'll be available to this one. Now, if you look at production, it's already, I did it earlier. I'm not going to undo it, right? It was already provisioned earlier, and you can see, as I indicated, it added a Redis URL here. Okay, so I'm going to leave this over here for a second. before we do our code, there's one last thing we need to do, is we need to know how to connect to these Redis instances to look at the data, right, for troubleshooting purposes. So there's a library, you can Google how to install it on your machine. I'm on a Mac, so I used Brew, but there's different installations. So there's a library called Redis Client, and there's GUIs too, although I couldn't find one I liked, so I just used the built-in, the kind of de facto GUI, the command line client. You type in this, and then you type in the URL that you're trying to connect to. So it's Redis localhost, and then it's port. I don't think I really need to provide the port, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right, that means I'm connected to that port, and if I type in keys, this has got an empty data set, right? So let's quit out of that. And then just so you know, you can actually connect to, just to prove it, I guess I can copy and paste here real quick. I can connect to my Redis CLI. I can also connect to my ones in keys star, the ones that are in my production apps. And you can connect to them and look at them there. And you can look at your review app ones too, once they're spun up too. Okay, so let me get out of that. Okay, so that is Redis Client. Okay, so the next step is let's write some code to interact with Redis and then test it. So the first thing we need to do is install some dependencies. Okay, make sure, right. That's going to be npm install Redis, which is the primary client for Node for Redis. So install that. Okay, make sure my audio is still working. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to install, turns out that it doesn't have TypeScript definition, so add the TypeScript definitions. There's another library we're going to use. Let me type it first and I'll explain what it is. UUID. When we create the keys in the Redis server, we need unique IDs, and this UUID library is a great way of creating unique keys, right? So I'm going to use it. It's pretty much the de facto way of doing it in Node, and it doesn't have types. Okay. Okay, the last step here is, and I hope I didn't delete it because that would be really frustrating. Okay, I still have it. Okay. So there's a bit of code that that we'll want to write, right? But the problem is there's a sufficient amount that I'm going to copy it from my desktop. Now you have access to the repo, so you can you can just look at what's in the repo and not have to type all this out either. Top server. Okay, so I just copied over a new version of server, and what we'll do is we'll just walk through the difference file. So if I look here, it'll basically tell me what's changed from the old version to new version. So we'll just walk through it real quick. Okay, so it's it's a non-trivial amount of new code, but it's not hard, but it's enough that I don't want to type it all out again. Okay, so real quick, we import Redis. Great. We import UUID, fine. There's a fair amount of Redis setup. In this case, I'm defining the token that I'm going to use to prefix my token keys with. Okay. I'm going to read the process out of process environment. I'm reading out the Redis URL, right? And I fail hard if it doesn't exist. Okay. I create a client, and Redis is an older library. So it uses this older pattern of instead of like promises and failing, what you actually do here is you create the client, which creates the client and connects asynchronously, but you have to listen for errors that get kicked out by the client. Say client can't connect, it'll actually kick out an error that you have to listen to, and then in this case I just fail hard if it doesn't connect. So this pattern is so old that I've forgotten about this. It took me a while to figure out what this was about. So this is an old way of dealing with asynchronous failures, basically, instead of using async await or promises or even callbacks. It's like really old. Okay, what this here is when the library is so old that it doesn't support promises out of the box. So in this case, I'm just taking the set function here, okay, and I'm just wrapping it in a promise constructor, right? So this basically converts essentially what is a callback-based solution into a promise solution. So if you just to Google, just to prove it, if you look at just Google, oh not Google, if you type in JavaScript promise, you find the first article you find, they show you an example right here, how to convert something that's a callback-based thing into a promise. So that's all that's what that code is, if you're wondering. So go past all that. So now we have the new endpoints here, right? And one is called protected, one is called authenticate, which is basically where you get a token, and protected is where you use that token. So let's look at the authenticate first. So the idea is maybe you're using this app and you need to quote unquote authenticate. So I hit this endpoint, and what this endpoint does is it generates a new token, it stores it in Redis, and gives you back the token. And then you can then use that token for your next request. Okay, and then the way you use the token is if you hit this protected endpoint. Again, this is very super simplified, by the way. I mean, there's other ways of doing this with middleware, but I'm trying to keep it simple. So if you hit a protected endpoint, I read the token out of the authorization header. If there is no token, I immediately return a not found, not authorized. But then I go ahead and I try to check to see if the token exists. If that call fails because hey, Redis is down or something, I will fail with a 500. But this will return either true or false. True means that the token exists. False means the token does not exist. So if there's no token, I fail you again with unauthorized. And if you're authorized, I send you the secret handshake secret world. That's it. One thing down here too, I just realized that previously I forgot when I wrote this code originally, didn't have a process exit one. So when something would fail, like at startup, I wasn't necessarily exiting properly. So that was a bug I caught actually in this version of the video. And basically how it came up was, if this thing failed here, I want to this is the old Postgres connection. If that fails, I really just want to stop the app. I didn't want it to be in some weird state, and I had left it in a weird state. Okay, that is the code. Again, you don't have to type this yourself. You'll be able to get this from the repo example. Okay, I think we're done with the code. So let's test to see how it works, right? So I should be able to go here and then type in npm runs watch, starts up the local server, development environment with the environment variable set, right? Let this load. Close this down. Okay, I'm listening. Okay, so if I go localhost 5000, all good, server's running. I go to authenticate. Let me blow this up. Okay. I get a token back, right? Also, let me jump into the command line real quick. If I do history grep Redis, if I go into 329, and if I say keys star, I don't remember doing this twice, but I must have, this may have been from an earlier example. I basically, here, I'm just for giggles, let me refresh this again, boom, and if I run this, keys, now there's 3. So every time I visit here, I'm adding a new key to this database, right? So that's expected. Close that out. Let me grab this key right here, the latest version of the key. Any one of these tokens would work, right? And then what I'm going to do is, let me just first show you what doesn't work. So if I go to localhost 5000, and then I type in protected with no keys, with no authorization header, I get a 401. Now the easiest way of doing like API testing, there's a library called Postman, which you can install on your own. You can use curl. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing things. This is a nice GUI tool for troubleshooting APIs. It's free. Let this spin up. Okay, close this down, localhost. Okay, let me just dismiss. Let me just close this out. Okay, I'm gonna go to HTTP localhost : 5000 protected. Send. I should get a 401 error, right? But if I go to authorization, no, headers, key, authorization, paste in that key I got from earlier, hit send, I should get my data. So now this is like a very bare bones authorization, right? It's just looking for a key. Again, this is not a pattern you'll necessarily use. In reality, if you're doing real authorization, you're going to do something with JSON web tokens, and there's a little bit more complexity around it, but I didn't want to get into that here. Okay, so everything's working locally. Now it's just a matter of committing this. So we'll do this in a couple steps. What I'll do is I'll do git commit, git add all, git commit testing. I don't know. After the second time of doing this video, I've become a little more impatient here. So for now, I'll do a review app in a minute. Let me just bypass that for now. Let me just go right, instead of doing a whole PR for this, right? I'm going to do an example where I'm just pushing straight to master, which should build this on staging, and let's validate that it's actually working. So let's go to Heroku, watch the build. You know, I could do all this from the command line too, like looking at the logs, but for some reason I find just looking at the GUI easier sometimes. So it's doing this continuous integrations running, and then also the app build's happening in parallel. Okay, if this takes another, it's going now. Okay. Come on. Is it released yet? Okay, it's released. Okay, so I'm opening the app. Okay, so that's working. So I go to 5000. So if I go, not 5000, if I go to authenticate, right, there's my token. So that must have saved it in Redis. And then if I go to, then I have to use Postman. So let me grab this URL. Oh, I have to grab two things. Okay, I'm not sure how. I'm going to have to copy and paste twice. Yeesh. Okay, let me just leave this here. Let me go to Postman. Okay, so instead of going to localhost, I want to go to this thing. Come on, I don't want to upgrade. I want to go to that /protected, it should fail. Right. In this case, I actually had a header, but it was the wrong header, right? So that was a good test. And then I want to go and change the header to the right header, which is the right key, which is here, and hit send, and there it is. It's working. Okay, so that's it for the production app, and then I guess to complete the loop, let's just do this as a review app, I guess. Okay, to do this as a review app, what I'm going to do is, before I do that, let me just push this to production so that push production, that should then get the production app up and running, and it should be working the same way. To do the review app, we can create a temporary PR. So I'm going to do code get branch test PR, get checkout test PR. Edit just something silly in here. You just go to the server. Where's the server file? So source, server, and I'm going to go to the very bottom, and I'm going to just change, just add a word test in here. Okay, so there you go, right? Now I've got that, and then I'm going to do get status. I have a change, get add all, get commit test. Okay, get push origin test PR. Okay, so now I've got my PR up and running. This is my PR branch. So then I need to go to GitHub. GitHub, go to here. I need to go to compare. I want to create a PR into master, create a PR. It's running continuing integration tests, and hopefully it's spinning up review app, which it is. So once we validate this works, then we'll be done with this video. I know I did it quickly, but this is starting to get repetitive a little bit, right? We're sort of reusing some of the same concepts over and over again. Come on. Creating app. Come on. Okay, I'm going to pause the video for a second. This may take another minute or so. Okay, now it just deployed. Okay, I have a call to get on here in a second. So let me open wrap. As expected, if I go under authenticate, and then I grab this. So this is PR14. If I go to Postman, oh yeah. Get through all this stuff here. So if I go to, oh come on, PR14, right? That's what I expected, and then a header. Send, hello secret, done. PR app is now working also. Okay, we're done with the video. I'll clean out my PRs in a bit. Thank you.